I'd like to begin by sharing with you a true story. This story really happened, and it really happened to me. It happened a couple years ago at the Tennessee Labor Day meeting. Big regional meeting. There's usually 300 or 400 people that are in attendance, and it's a wonderful meeting to go to. But as usually happens at big meetings, sometimes personal items get misplaced. And so before the service one evening, the brother who was supposed to open up, he got up in the pulpit and he said, by the way, there was a cell phone that was found left in the women's restroom. Now this cell phone is, and he began to describe it, was an iPhone. He said it had a phone case with a pink whale on it. And then he said, now I assume it belongs to a woman, but if it's your cell phone, then you can come see me after the service and get it. And of course, the way he said that, well, I assume it belongs to the woman, to a woman, raised a bunch of questions in everybody's minds. People started to think, well, did that belong to a guy or what? Well, the service went on, and the first speaker was Glenn Osborne. I love Brother Glenn, but sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth. He got up to speak, and he said, incidentally, before I begin tonight, I just want to say, when I heard about that pink whale phone that was left in the women's restroom, I immediately thought of Noah Howard. I don't know why. I just thought of Noah. And then he just went on preaching. This really happened too. You can ask everybody who was there. And of course, that raised all sorts of questions in people's mind. And people came up to me after the service. Some said, was that really your phone, Noah? And they thought it was mine. And other people thought it was some kind of inside joke between Glenn and I. And they were saying, come on, what's the joke? I had no idea what he was talking about. And so I went and I cornered Glenn after the service. I said, Glenn, what did you mean when you said that you thought that pink whale phone that was in the women's restroom belonged to me? He said, oh, you know. And then he just walked away. Well, I chased him down again, and I eventually got him to explain. He was thinking of Jonah and the whale, and he got Jonah mixed up with Noah. And then he just thought Noah Howard. Now that story is hilarious. I think it's funny. But imagine if Glenn and I hadn't been on good terms. What would I have thought? I don't even know. I probably would have been embarrassed or offended, or it would have been an awkward situation for sure. But just the fact that I was able to go and talk to him and clear things up is what makes it a funny story and not one that hurt me. I heard a quote the other day which has stuck in my mind ever since I heard it, and that is, in the absence of communication, perception becomes reality. That means when people don't communicate, whatever people think are happening is what is actually happening to them in their own mind. And I want to show you a story from the Bible about how this has the potential to go very wrong unless we are active in communicating with each other. Now, when God brought the 12 tribes of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, He made a promise to them. He said, I'm going to bring you to the land that I promised to your ancestor Abraham. That was the land of Canaan. And of course, there was a whole period of trial in the wilderness because of the Israelites' unfaithfulness, but God was faithful eventually to bring the next generation through the wilderness into the land of Canaan under the leadership of Joshua. But there was a work to be done. God was not just going to give them the land. He said, you are going to have to fight and overcome the ungodly nations who inhabit it, and I will be with you, and you will win the battles, but you will have to fight and conquer this land, and you will have to conquer all of it if you want to possess it. Now, in Numbers chapter 32, the Israelites have made their way through the wilderness. They have arrived on the east side of the Jordan River. And Numbers 32 verses 1 through 5 says this: Now the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad had an exceedingly large number of livestock. And they saw that the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that it was indeed a place suitable for livestock. So the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben came and spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, Adaroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elel, Sabam, Nebo, and Baon, the land which Yahweh struck before the congregation of Israel, is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if you have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. Now, I should have done this earlier, but I'm going to draw just a basic map of the land of Israel up here so you understand what's going on. This is Israel. This is the Jordan River with the Sea of Galilee up in the north and the Dead Sea in the south. The Israelites have come from this direction out of the wilderness, and they come to this land east of the Jordan River. And as we're reading here in Numbers 32, Gad and Reuben, two of the tribes of Israel, they take a look at this land and they think, this is where we want to stop. Now, God's intention is for all the tribes to fight together and to conquer the whole land. But they've hardly gotten into the land when a few tribes are looking and they're thinking, you know, this is what we want for our possession, and so we would like to just stop right here. Now, obviously, this made Moses and many other Israelites upset with this request. And they begin to say, so you're telling us you're just going to sit here while the rest of us have to cross the river and go fight all these battles to take Canaan? And they say, haven't you forgotten what happened when we came here the first time, 40 years before, and we sent spies in and they came back and discouraged everyone, and we had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And a whole generation died because of that. And Moses says, look, you have risen in your father's place. He's saying you are in danger of discouraging everybody a second time. We're going to have to go through all that wilderness wandering again. Why do you want to increase the Lord's anger against Israel? And so a compromise had to be reached here. In Numbers 32, verses 16 through 19, they say, here's what we're going to do. Allow us to build sheepfolds and cities for our families so that they can be safe, and we will send our fighting men into the land with you. We're going to leave our families behind here in this piece of land we want for our inheritance. We'll send our warriors along with the rest of Israel, and they will not come back until we have fully conquered the land and everybody has their inheritance. Now, this compromise was acceptable, and Moses gives this whole warning that you better keep your word. Don't go home early. You've got to stick it out with all of us until we've taken the whole land, or your sin is going to find you out. And with those words of admonition, the people of Gad and Reuben, they build cities, they leave their families behind, and the fighting men go ahead and come into the land with them. Now, the Bible also indicates that the half-tribe of Ephraim decided they wanted the same deal. So understand this. There are some tribes of Israel who are going to get land on the east side of the Jordan, and the rest are going to get their land on the west side. Now, they're faithful, they keep their promise, and they send 40,000 fighting men with the rest of the Israelite nation to go across the Jordan and to fight and to conquer Canaan. Now, we come to Joshua chapter 22, and the conquest of Canaan has reached its end. Under Joshua's leadership, Israel has taken the land, and now it's time for everybody to go home and to receive their inheritance. And so Joshua summons these men of Gad and Reuben and Manasseh. I wrote Ephraim up on the board. It's actually Manasseh. Let me fix that. Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. So Joshua summons these men from these tribes, and he commends them. He says, "You have kept the promise that you made to God and to Moses and to your fellow Israelites, and so you have earned your rest. It's time for you to go back home and to take possession of the land that you chose." But look in Joshua 22, verses 4 and 5. "And now Yahweh your God has given rest to your brothers as he spoke to them. So now turn and go to your tents, to the land of your possession, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan. Only keep yourselves very carefully to do the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God and walk in all his ways and keep his commandments and cling to him and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." Joshua is telling them, make very careful that you remain faithful to God. You're going to be over there on the east side of the Jordan, but don't forget that you're just as much a part of us as anybody else, any of the other tribes. And so with this, the Easterners, as we'll call them, go back across the Jordan with Joshua's blessing. Now, very soon after this, something happens which very nearly shatters the peace among the 12 tribes of Israel. Peace had been cultivated by years of fighting and working together in this task that was given them from the Lord. We turn to verse 11 here in Joshua chapter 22. And it says, "Now the children of Israel heard someone say, 'Behold, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar on the frontier of the land of Canaan, in the region of the Jordan, on the children of Israel's side.' And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of the children of Israel gathered together at Shiloh to go to war against them." So what happens is these Easterners go back home, and then some time passes, and then here comes this rumor. And I think that's so telling. Verse 11 says, they heard someone say. We don't know who said it, but I heard someone say that these Easterners, and they seem to make a distinction between the Israelites, the children of Israel, and these ones over in the east. They've gone home and they built an altar. They've built some kind of altar. And not only that, they built it on our side of the river. And people get to talking. They start asking, what's this altar about? And people start saying, the only reason someone could want to build an altar is if they want to worship a pagan god. God's altar is here with us in the tabernacle. That's the only authorized place for God's altar, which is true. So they thought the only reason someone might want to build something like this is they have a nefarious purpose. They've turned aside to Baal or some other false god. Now I imagine very easily people were thinking about a couple of incidents that had happened to them in the recent past. For one thing, the incident at Ai. You remember, when they first came across the Jordan River, what did they run into? The city of Jericho. And there was this magnificent battle in which there wasn't even a battle. The Israelites marched 7 times around the walls of Jericho over 7 days. And then they blew the trumpets, and the Lord caused the walls of those cities to fall flat. And the Israelites just marched right in. They took the place without any effort at all. And then what was the next town on the road ahead of Jericho? It was this little town called Ai, practically a village. There was nothing like Jericho. They didn't even have a wall. And everyone thought, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. And so they march right up there to Ai and promptly get clobbered by this tiny little mountain village. And they run all the way back home, and nobody can figure out what has gone wrong. And Joshua is just devastated, and he begins to pray to God, and God says, why are you crying out to me? There's sin in the camp. And God informs them, remember how I told you that the first fruits of Canaan are mine, and you don't get to take anything, any of the spoils of the city of Jericho? Well, there's a man in your camp who did. He took some spoils and he's hidden it in his tent. And eventually they get the man to fess up. And he and his whole family lose their lives because of that. They knew they weren't supposed to take anything, but they did anyway, and they covered it up. And that was a very visible illustration of rebellion and what happens when there's sin in the middle of the camp. There's another incident too. In Numbers chapter 25, there is a situation where these women from the nation that's nearby are seducing the Israelites into marrying them. And in the course of this marriage, they start getting their husbands to go after false gods and to worship Baal. And Moses and the Israelites are assembled having a prayer service, we might say, in Numbers 25. They are weeping and they're repenting and they're crying out to God for forgiveness. And here comes this prince of Israel named Zimri with a pagan woman on his arm, and they come right past the tabernacle, and in view of everybody, they go into a tent that's right there. And everybody's so angry that, in fact, a man named Phinehas takes a spear and he goes right to the tent, and the Bible says that he speared the man and the woman together. He was so upset that someone would be so flagrant about this sin that to just do it right in the middle of the camp in front of everybody. And he actually saved Israel that day because God had caused a plague to break out. And as soon as that situation was rectified, God stopped the plague right there. He stopped striking people dead. But there were a lot more people who died before it stopped. The Israelites got the impression when there is sin in the camp, there is danger, and there's sometimes even far-reaching consequences that affect everybody, all of God's people. So I'm sure that the Israelites had these two situations in their mind when they hear about this. Now they're hearing rumors that their countrymen have gone home and promptly set up some kind of, nobody knows, sounds like a pagan altar. And they think, we got to go take care of this. We can't just let this stand. If there's sin in the camp, God's going to be upset with us too. And so they begin to gather together. They're ready to go to war. They're ready to march over there and to fight these men who they just got done fighting alongside. They're so worried about this. But thankfully, there are some cooler heads that prevail. And it says that they get a delegation together to go check things out. Joshua 22, verses 13 and 14. Then the sons of Israel sent to the sons of Reuben and to the sons of Gad, to the half tribe of Manasseh, into the land of Gilead. Here's who they're going to send to go talk. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest. Now that's interesting. That's the guy who was so mad he grabbed the spear and he went and stabbed those people committing sexual immorality. They must have thought, well, he's really passionate for God. I guess he would be a good choice to go send. And so they choose Phinehas. And verse 14, and with him 10 leaders, one leader for each father's household from each of the tribes of Israel. And each one of them was the head of his father's household among the thousands of Israel. So some cooler heads prevailed there. They thought, let's get some respected leaders together and let's go get to the bottom of this. Before we go forward with the nuclear option of marching to war, let's find out what this is all about. Now let's read verses 16 through 20. So they came to the sons of Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, and they spoke with them, saying, thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what is this unfaithful act which you've committed against the God of Israel, turning away from following the Lord this day by building yourselves an altar to rebel against the Lord this day? Is the iniquity of Peor too small a thing for us, from which we have not cleansed ourselves to this day, although there was a plague on the congregation of Yahweh? That's the incident that involved Phinehas and the spear. 18, yet you are turning away from this day from following the Lord. Now it will be that if you rebel against the Lord today, he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel tomorrow. If, however, the land of your possession is unclean, then cross into the land of the possession of the Lord, where the tabernacle of the Lord dwells, and take possession among us. But do not rebel against Yahweh, nor rebel against us, by building an altar for yourselves beside the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan the son of Zerah act unfaithfully in the things devoted to destruction? And indignation fell on all the congregation of Israel. But he was not the only man to breathe his last in his iniquity. I want to pause and just analyze what is going on, because I think this is a good example for us to learn from. They send this delegation to inquire about what's going on. They have men who are respected leaders who are heading this up. This is an official action. And there is a legitimate concern here. What are you doing, brethren? And they point out those two examples which were certainly on their minds, that of Achan after Jericho and of Zimri at Peor shortly after that. And they go to their brethren and they say, why are you doing this? Don't you remember these incidents where these two men were unfaithful and they were rebellious, and it caused issues for a lot more people than just them. The consequences for their sin were not limited to them. They dragged a whole lot of people with them. And we don't want that. They say, we've got a duty to come here and to ask what's going on. But, I love this in verse 19. They don't just come to accuse, they come with a solution prepared. Look at this. Verse 19, they ask, now as we understand it, you have built an altar of worship. And you know that the tabernacle is the place you need to go to properly worship. And what they ask here in verse 19, they say, is the problem that the land that you've taken for an inheritance is too far? Is it too far for you to go? They say, we will give you land on our side of the river. Wouldn't it be worth it to just come on over here on the west side of Jordan? We will give you an inheritance here. That would be better than going and building your own place to worship. I love that. That's how you can tell that they're here because they care, not just because they're here to accuse. I think we should always, if we're in a situation where we have to confront someone or maybe a group that is doing something that's not good, let's come bringing a solution. Let's come with something positive and constructive to offer. That shows that we've really been thinking about it and we're concerned and we actually care about their well-being. And that would take some sacrifice for them to give up part of their land on the west side of the Jordan. But they were willing to do that if it meant saving their brethren. Now, we're going to see that it was a good thing that they sent some delegates to figure out what was going on, because as it turns out, this whole thing was a misunderstanding. Let's read verses 21 through 29. Then the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh answered and spoke to the heads of the thousands of Israel. The mighty one, God, Yahweh, the mighty one, God, Yahweh, He knows, and may Israel itself know, if it was in rebellion or if in an unfaithful act against the Lord, do not save us this day. If we've built for ourselves an altar to turn away from following the Lord, or to perform a burnt offering or grain offering on it, or if to offer sacrifices of peace offerings on it, may the Lord Himself require it. That's how you know they're really faithful. They say, if we really did build a pagan altar, you would be right in coming here to kill us. And they're essentially taking an oath before God. But keep reading. Verse 24, but truly, we have done this out of concern for a reason, saying, in time to come, your sons may say to our sons, what have you to do with Yahweh, the God of Israel? And Yahweh has made the Jordan a border between us and you. And you, sons of Reuben and sons of Gad, you have no portion in the Lord. So your sons may make our sons stop fearing the Lord. Therefore we said, let us build an altar, not for burnt offering or for sacrifice. Rather, it shall be a witness between us and you, and between our generations after us, that we are to perform the service of the Lord before Him, with our burnt offerings, and with our sacrifices, and with our peace offerings, so that your sons will not say to our sons in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. Therefore we said, it will also be that if they say this to us or to our generations in time to come, then we shall say, see the copy of the altar of the Lord which our fathers made, not for burnt offering or for sacrifice. Rather, it is a witness between us and you. Far be it from us to rebel against the Lord and turn away from following the Lord this day by building an altar for burnt offering. You see what they say here. They say, we didn't build this altar because we were looking for some different way to worship. We were concerned because of this river that separates us right here. They said, we're worried, first of all, that if we go home, later on our sons are going to see this river and think, we're not part of Israel. We don't have anything to do with them. Or worse, your sons on this side of the river might look at us and say, God put that river between us and them because they're not part of us. And they said, here's why we built that altar on your side, so that we can look at that, and when our children ask, what's that for? We can tell them that is a reminder that you go over to the Lord's tabernacle to offer worship, because we are of Israel just as much as those on the other side of the Jordan. You see, it had been a whole misunderstanding. It had been completely blown out of proportion. It's like that saying, in the absence of communication, perception becomes reality. Because there was no communication, people were looking at that altar and they started speculating. They didn't ask. They started speculating. And then pretty soon the telephone game gets all the way back around, and now something completely different's going on. Those church people over there are offering pagan worship. We've got to go do something about that. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. And somebody said, wait, maybe we need to go talk to them first before we start jumping to conclusions. You know, that's a biblical idea. I didn't just make that up. Proverbs 18, verse 17 says, the first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. You need to underline that one right there. Proverbs 18, verse 17. Put that one on your fridge and think about that. How many times have we been in a situation where someone comes running up to us and they say, now, I don't really know if I'm supposed to say this or share this. If you ever hear those words, you should respond, well, you probably shouldn't share it with me then. But someone runs up and they say, I love brother so-and-so. I love him to death. Oh, but I heard this about him. And people just start sharing everything under the sun. And when you ask, well, where did you get that information? When did you talk to brother or sister so-and-so about that? People say, well, I hadn't talked to him yet. This other person over there told me. And then when you go to talk to that person, well, it's that other person over there told me. And pretty soon you find out nobody's actually gone and talked to the person. That's not how it's supposed to be among God's people. We should have the kind of care and concern for each other that we are just able to go and speak to one another directly. Sometimes it's awkward. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's awkward. But if we come, hopefully, with open hearts and maybe with a solution showing, that we really care about them, we can have these kind of conversations. We can be able to go and say, I heard something that didn't sound like you, but I was concerned. I was worried. And I wanted to make sure that I was getting all the facts straight. And so I thought, I better just come straight to you and talk about it. That's the way to resolve problems. And of course, that's what Jesus taught. In Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17, he said, if there's some issue or situation between you and another brother, in a personal matter, personal dispute, you need to go talk to them privately first. Try to work it out one-on-one. If you do, you have gained your brother. That's the whole goal. We want them to be our brother once again. If that doesn't work, then it's time to take 2 or 3 people. And by that, I think the wisest option is leaders of the church, like elders, or people who are really, who the situation is relevant for. And then finally, it becomes a congregational matter. The first response is not to go around and talk to everybody else. It's not to write up a passive-aggressive email or text or social media post that you just fire out there into the void for whoever will listen, where, you never actually name the person, but you give plenty of details. You're just specific enough so that everybody knows who you're talking about, even though you didn't say their name. That's not how the Lord teaches us to resolve these kind of personal problems. And there's a reason for that, because in so many cases, if we go and communicate, we often find it was all a misunderstanding. All it was somebody heard someone say something that was an unsubstantiated rumor. And if we go right to the source, we can find that out. Thankfully, this situation here in Joshua 22 was resolved for the better. Everybody left this on good terms. Everybody was reassured. We're all faithful here. We all love God, and nothing that has happened has been wrong or sinful, and we can be at peace here. Nobody had to die for it. It's a good thing that their name was not slandered. Now we could just go back to the way things were. And that's the hope. If we find that the parties are innocent and no wrongdoing has occurred, we need to be able to just go back to the way things were before. We should be able to be at peace with them once again. They're right with God. I'm right with God. They didn't sin in doing something wrong. I didn't sin by becoming angry without cause. And everything's okay. But I would point out too, finally, if we do find that wrong has happened and the person repents and they show the fruits of repentance and there's prayer and there is a restoring and this person is forgiven, we've really got to treat them like they're forgiven too. We need to be able to restore the relationship and to treat them as we treated them before. If people are not guilty, or they were guilty and sinned, but they repented and they have taken the steps to be restored and to be forgiven, we should have unity and peace with them once more. It's amazing how so many situations that we encounter regularly, maybe not every day, but every year, maybe multiple times a year, the Bible has something to say about. So far, and I'm not that old, but so far I haven't found any sort of situation of life that the Bible doesn't speak to. It's pretty comprehensive. And this is one area that we can all benefit from. When we talk about jumping to conclusions, we never like to be on the opposite side of that, right? We never like to be on the receiving end when people have jumped to conclusions about us. When I was sitting there and Glenn was talking about the pink whale phone, I didn't really appreciate that. I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. And thankfully, we were able to resolve that. But let's think about that. The next time that we're in the position when we're on the giving end, we have the opportunity to put a stop to unsubstantiated gossip. someone's trying to come to us and give us a little nugget of gossip for us to then pass on, let's be the person who stops it right there and says, we need to get to the bottom of this situation and resolve it in the way that the Lord wants us to. Not by gossiping, but by talking and communicating with the other person. That's all I've got to say on this study tonight. But we need to think about how we communicate, because how we choose to interact with our fellow man will affect how God interacts with us on the final day of judgment. Think about in Luke chapter 15, the parable of the prodigal son, with the young son who was rebellious, squandered his father's wealth, and went off and lived a terrible, sinful life. And he realized, I need to come back. And he did come back, and he really did repent, and he really was received by the father. But that's not how the parable ends. There's that older brother who hears his younger brother's back, and then he gets upset. He feels like he's been wronged, although it's not really him that's been wronged, it's his father. But he starts thinking, I feel like I wasn't treated right here. I didn't get the same privilege afforded to me that my younger brother had afforded to him. And that older brother is, at the end of that parable, standing outside the father's house. Did you ever catch that? The father had to come out to him. The faithful older brother who was upset and angry really without a good cause. And the father said, shouldn't it be right for you to rejoice? Your younger brother was lost, but now he's found again. Come inside the house. We need to think about that, because sometimes we're the older brother in that parable who's angry or who's upset with others without a cause. And instead of resolving things the biblical way, we just kind of go off in the corner with our arms crossed. We're thinking, well, when they come to me, that's when I'm going to take care of it. What we have to realize is, in that position, you're outside the Father's house. And that's not where you want to stay. And so the invitation is for us to come inside, to listen to the Father, and to take the steps to resolve those feelings of hurt and anger and bitterness by going to our brother or sister who's wronged us and working it out. And then we can have peace and joy in the Father's house. Think about that tonight. I don't know how it is with you. You don't know how it is with me. But we know how it is between us and God and between those who we may have issues with. Let's take care of that. Let's get it right. Let's not stand outside the Father's house in bitterness. Think about how it is with you and the Lord tonight. And if you're a baptized believer, you know what you need to do. You need to repent. You need to pray for forgiveness. And then once church is over, if there's somebody who you need to resolve something with, you need to call them or text them or go to them and make it right, so that doesn't become between you and God. If that's what you need to do, let this song that we're about to sing inspire you to do whatever it is you need to do to be right with the Lord. Come while we stand and sing.